Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Gopi Chanda Ballabha Giribharatari Gopi Chanda Ballabha Giribharatari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chanda Ballabha Giribharatari Gopi Chanda Gopi Chanda Ballabha Giribharatari Gopi Chanda Ballabha Giribharatari Yashoda Nandana Yashoda Nandana Yashoda Nandana Yashoda Nandana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Shai Vishnu Vishnu Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Satashi Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charana Arvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya Save the Whole World Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nityamrita Vishnu Vishnu Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Satashi Srimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Premjaka Ho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Hari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki, Braj Bhavi Shri Vrindavan Ki, Navadip Mayapur Dhamma Ki, Purushtam Chatra Jaganapuri Dhamma Ki, Ganga Mai Ki, Jamuna Mai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Tulasi Maharani Ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki, Jainitai Gopremanandi, all glorious devotees, all glorious devotees, all glorious devotees, all glorious, Lord Peter, Shri Grand, Shri Garanga, all glorious Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Dhamma Vishnu. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhakting Haro Bhagavati Prabhahan Ajasam. Bhakting Haro Bhagavati Prabhahan Ajasam. Bhakting Haro Bhagavati Prabhahan Ajasam. Ananda Bashpa Kalaya Muhu Adyamana. Ananda Bashpa Kalaya Muhu Adyamana. Ananda Bashpa Kalaya Muhu Adyamana. Bhaktim Haro Bhagavati Prabhahan Ajasam. Ananda Bashpa Kalaya Muhu Adyamana. Viklidyamana Hridaya Pulakachitango. Viklidyamana Hridaya Pulakachitango. Viklidyamana Hridaya Pulakachitango. Natmanam Asmarad Aso Iti Muktalinga. Natmanam Asmarad Aso Natmanam Asmarad Aso Iti Muktalinga. Natmanam Asmarad Aso Iti Muktalinga. Viklidyamana Hridaya Pulakachitango. Viklidyamana Hridaya Pulakachitango. Natmanam Asmarad Aso Iti Muktalinga. Bhaktim Haro Bhagavati Prabhahan Ajasam. Ananda Bashpa Kalaya Muhu Adyamana. Viklidyamana Hridaya Pulakachitango. Natmanam Asmarad Aso Iti Muktalinga. Bhakti Bhaktim Hado Bhagavati Pravahan Ajasram. Ananda Bashpa Kalaya Muhur Ardyamana. Viklidyamana Hridaya Purikachitango. Natmana Masmaradasa Viti Mukta Linga. Vaishnavis?
Bhaktim Haro Bhagavati Pravahana Jasram.
Bhaktim Haro Bhagavati Pravahana Jasram.
Ananda Bashpa Kalaya Muhur Aryamana.
Ananda Bashpa Kalaya Muhur Aryamana.
Viklidyamana Hidaya Pulaka Chitango.
Viklidyamana Hidaya Pulaka Chitango.
Natmanam Ashmaratasav Iti Muktalinga.
Natmanam Asmaratasav Iti Muktalinga. Bhaktim Haro Bhagavati Pravanajasram Ananda Vaspakaraya Muhurajamana Viklidyamana Hridaya Pulakachitango
Bhaktim, devotional service. Haro, unto Hari. Bhagavati, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just in case you weren't sure who we're talking about, yeah? Pravahan, constantly engaging in. Ajasram, always. Ananda, blissful. Bashpa Kalaya, by a stream of tears. Muhu, again and again. Arjamana, being overcome. Viklidyamana, melting. Hridaya, his heart. Pulaka, standing of hairs. Achita, covered. Anga, his body. Na, not. Atmanam, body. Ashmarat, he remembered. Aso, he. Iti, thus. Muktalinga, free from the subtle body. So what's being described here is the ecstatic symptoms that Dhruva Maharaj manifested as a result of his practice of bhakti. And some, because he was performing yoga also, but ultimately it's not the yoga that he was doing, it's saying here, fixed in his sitting position by yogic practice, controlled his breathing process, etc., etc. According to our acharyas, particularly Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he was performing these different yogic practices more to set an example for others, not so much that he needed to do himself. And actually, where he achieved his success is being stated here. Bhaktim Haro Bhagavati, this first line is saying, by performing devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he achieved these ecstatic symptoms. Translation. Because of his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes. His heart melted, and there was shivering and standing of the hairs all over his body. Thus transformed, in a trance of devotional service, Dhruva Maharaj completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. And this is an important point, because he gave up this external connection with the body, this mukta linga. Linga in this sense is meaning the subtle body. Mukta obviously means to be free from. Because he gave up this connection with the subtle body, he became liberated from material bondage. And he was no longer bound by the laws of nature. Okay, Prabhupada's purport, so not terribly long, but it's a lengthy purport. Due to constant engagement in devotional service, hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping the deity, etc., as prescribed in the 9 varieties, there are different symptoms which appear in the body of a devotee. What are the nine practices of bhakti? Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedana. These are the 9 practices. And this is mentioned, of course, in the 7th canto. And we see that Rupa Goswami has described in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu different personalities who perfected themselves by these practices. And as Rupa Goswami points out, you can practice either one of them, or some of them, or all of them. But you can achieve perfection just by practicing one. Just like we have the example here in the Bhagavatam of Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. Shukadeva Goswami, he perfected himself by speaking the Bhagavatam, and Parikshit Maharaj, he perfected himself by hearing the Bhagavatam. And this is a really important point. Prabhupada comments on this in a purport in the first canto. I think it's the 5th chapter, and it's a point I make quite a lot, especially with pujaris, because the tendency is amongst pujaris, not always the case, but the tendency is there amongst pujaris, is they don't give enough time to hearing and chanting, especially reading Prabhupada's books. It's an essential part of our practice, and an essential part of our life, is we need to read Prabhupada's books. Srila Prabhupada makes a comment as I was saying in the first canto, that actually he's not minimizing the importance of reading, but he's saying more important than reading is to speak the Bhagavatam and to hear the Bhagavatam. So the point is, you read, you should share what you read. You should share your realizations, because you'll also find that when you share your realizations with others, this helps to solidify the realizations you have. It helps to deepen those realizations. So it's very important not only to study Prabhupada's books, but to share the knowledge you gain from studying Prabhupada's books, and also to regularly attend. There's that verse in Nasta Prayasha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, by regularly hearing the Bhagavatam. Then all there's abhadreshu, these inauspicious things in the heart, they become destroyed. And loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. It means if you're regularly hearing the Bhagavatam, this is why this literature is so important. If you regularly hear the Bhagavatam, then devotional service will become established as a fact in your heart. You will not be able to give up this devotional. This is irrevocable. When something's irrevocable, you cannot reverse it. And sometimes we see devotees that go away from Krishna consciousness, but often you'll find they come back. Because it's there in the heart, they can't give it up. As long as they're not committing offences, they can't give it up. These eight bodily transformations, these 8 bodily transformations which indicate that a devotee is already liberated with himself are called Asta Sattvika Vikara. When a devotee completely forgets his bodily existence, he should be understood to be liberated. This is this Muktalinga. He forgot his external bodily existence. He just had no connection with that anymore. And this is the position of being liberated, because he's not seeing himself as the body. This Jivan Muktas Uchate, as is mentioned in the Upanishads. He is no longer encaged in the body. The example is given here, the example is given that when a coconut becomes completely dry, the coconut pulp within the coconut shell separates from the bondage of the shell and the outer covering. By moving the dry coconut, one can hear that the pulp within is no longer attached to the shell or to the covering. So if you ever see a dry coconut, usually you get coconuts in India, they're green. You cut the top and you can drink them. There's especially a doll. But then when the coconut becomes really brown on the outside, you pick it up and you shake it and you'll hear the pulp inside rattling around. It's no longer palatable, at least from the concept of eating or drinking, but it's this is the analogy that's been given here. And in the same way, Prabhupada is explaining that when, I'll read what he says here, it's interesting. Similarly, when one is fully absorbed in devotional service, he's completely disconnected from the 2 material coverings, the subtle and gross bodies. Dhruva Maharaj actually attained this stage of life by constantly discharging devotional service. He has already been described as a Mahabhagavata, for unless one becomes a Mahabhagavata or a first-class pure devotee, these symptoms are not visible. Lord Chaitanya exhibited all these symptoms. Thakur Haridas also exhibited them, and there are many pure devotees who manifested such bodily symptoms, such as Bharat Maharaj, such as Rishabh Dev. So many great personalities have manifested these symptoms. And just to give you an idea what these symptoms are, this is reference from Anchulila 1499. The 8 ecstatic symptoms are the state of being stunned, just like I was talking last night about Vasudeva and Devaki. When they saw Krishna Balaram, they became stunned. Not just like sometimes we get, a bit sort of taken aback by something. Stunned means you can't do anything, you can't function, you can't think, you can't move, you can't anything. You're just stunned, like a statue. Perspiration, standing of the body hairs and then faltering the voice, trembling, fading of the body's colour, tears and devastation. And sometimes these things can manifest as a material emotion, just like we were reading last night from the 2nd chapter of the Gita, how Arjuna was describing these different symptoms he was manifesting. But in his case, they weren't ecstatic symptoms. They had a material stimulus. And you'll see when one manifests ecstatic symptoms, the stimulus is going to be transcendental, the process of bhakti. Not that someone's fearful of losing their life or something, they manifest some ecstatic symptom. It's not. It's a mundane symptom. And the thing is that these symptoms generally, at least in the spiritual sense, that they become overwhelming, so much so that the living entity cannot function. And even it gets to the point where these symptoms actually interfere with their practice of bhakti, that they're so overwhelming that these symptoms even stop them from performing bhakti. Yeah. And we see that many great souls have manifested. You look in the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, that one prominent example was the pastime of Kaliya. When Krishna was dancing on the hoods of Kaliya, the residents of Vrindavan heard from the cowherd boys that he was down in the lake and he was dancing on the hoods of Kaliya, and they all came running down there out of fear. But it wasn't a mundane fear, it was transcendental. And then when they saw Krishna dancing on the hoods of, actually when they got down there, Krishna was entwined in the coils of Kaliya and he wasn't moving. And Kaliya's coils were getting tighter and tighter around his transcendental body. And what happened as a result is that the residents of Braj started to manifest these ecstatic symptoms. And so much so that Mother Yasoda was so overwhelmed with ecstatic symptoms, she died. She left her body. And when Krishna saw that, he thought, okay, I've taken this too far. Because he was, as I mentioned yesterday, Krishna performs these various pastimes. And we understand Paritraya Saranam Vinishchaya Chaduskritam, etc. Prabhupada explains this is not the real reason Krishna performs these pastimes. Because for the devotees, they're already saved. There's no question of saving devotees because they're absorbed in Krishna's service. They're already saved. They're already going back to the spiritual world. And this Vinishchaya Chaduskritam, to annihilate the miscreants, the material nature can do that. All it takes is for the floor of the ocean to move a meter. Millions of miscreants wiped out in a moment. The tsunami will just travel halfway around the world and it'll just wipe out millions of miscreants in just very quickly. An asteroid crashes into the planet. A big asteroid take out a whole city. So the material nature can very easily annihilate miscreants. No, the real reason Krishna comes is to engage in these loving exchanges with his devotees, to deepen their attachment to him, because Krishna has attachment for his devotees. The devotees have attachment to Krishna, and when this attachment deepens, it's very pleasurable to the devotees and it's very pleasurable to Krishna. So this is why Krishna's main purpose in coming here is to have these loving exchanges with his devotees. And we see these, especially these exchanges he had in Vrindavan, and in particular the exchanges as a child. These are, there's that, coming up now we have Kartik, and we sing the Dhammadrastika. And this is a song written by Satyavrata Muni, and in there he mentions about this, what's that, I can't remember the line. It talks about the childhood part, Balya, I can't remember the line. It talks about the childhood pastimes of Krishna, how these are the most relishable to Krishna, more so than any of the other pastimes, because he's taking the position of the dependent. He doesn't have to worry about anything. And the devotees are completely in anxiety. It's just like anyone who has a child, if the child runs off, it's not so bad here because you don't have much traffic or anything like that, but, I was in Zurich recently, and there's a big, busy intersection out the front there, and I noticed this, one of the devotees there, she had her child with her, and the child kept running off here, running off there, so she's in anxiety, the child's going to get out of the road, get run over, stuff like that. So for the parent there's a lot of anxiety, but for the child, no anxiety, the child's just having fun. Krishna, he likes that exchange. He likes when the devotees feel anxiety for him. Prabhupada sometimes would say, you purchase anxiety for Krishna at any cost, because this is pleasurable to the Lord. That's when the devotee experiences anxiety for him. They are not to be imitated, but when one is actually, he's talking about these ecstatic symptoms, they are not to be imitated, but when one is actually advanced, these symptoms are exhibited. And the thing is, you can't stop these symptoms manifesting. It's not like you can turn them on or off. Sometimes we see Srila Prabhupada, he would be chanting Jai Radha Madhava, or he'd be talking about some exchange between the devotee and the Lord. And Prabhupada would start to manifest ecstatic symptoms. Tears would shoot from his eyes like a syringe. He was overwhelmed. At that time, it is to be understood that the devotee is materially free. Of course, from the beginning of devotional service, the path of liberation immediately opens, just as the coconut taken from the tree immediately begins to dry. It simply takes some time for the shell and pulp to separate from one another. And this is a really nice way that Prabhupada is explaining this. As soon as we start the process of bhakti, the path to liberation is open to us. We just have to stay on the path and we'll get there. Just like as soon as you take the coconut from the tree, the process of drying, or you pick a flower from a tree, or a leaf from a tree or anything like that, they start to dry up immediately. It takes time. It's not going to manifest straight away that, oh bang, the coconut's dry. It'll take time. But, and just like with the example of the coconut, if the coconut's in a hotter environment, a hot, dry environment, it will dry out quicker. So, just like we see with Dhruva Maharaj, his practice of bhakti was quite intense. Even at the age of 5 years. It's a really interesting story because we go back to chapter 8. This is where he started his practice of bhakti. That he goes to the forest as a young boy because he's really annoyed with his father and his stepmother, and he's quite angry, and he wants to avenge this situation. He wants to get back at his stepmother because he felt very insulted that he was told he couldn't sit on his father's lap, and so he goes to the forest with the intent, because his mother told him, I haven't heard, but I've heard you can, I don't know, but I've heard you can find Vishnu in the forest. So he said, okay, I'm going to go to the forest, I'm going to find Vishnu, and I'm going to, get back at them for this. And so then he goes to the forest. Narad Muni hears about this. He hears about the determination of his chakra. He finds it very interesting because he's only a 5-year-old boy. And then you'll see that Narad Muni starts to preach to Dhruva Maharaj. He says, the path of bhakti, he explains the path of bhakti. He says, but this is very difficult. Not many people achieve this. And, I think you should go home. You're just a young boy. And besides, in the forest, there's many dangerous animals, tigers and things like that. And Dhruva Maharaj basically says to him, look, if you're afraid of the animals, you go home. I'm staying here. I'm going to find out where Vishnu is. Yeah? And he says, for someone in the mode of goodness, they can appreciate these instructions. I'm in the mode of ignorance. I don't understand these sort of things, So then Narad Muni, he's impressed by his determination. And we'll see at the end of this chapter that Narad Muni actually glorifies Dhruva Maharaj's devotional service. And so Narad Muni was impressed by his determination to achieve the goal of Vishnu. So he instructs him in the process of devotional service. And he instructs him, as Navani Nirad was pointing out yesterday, in a quite a difficult path where he had to stand on his 1 foot, with his arms up in the air. It was a yogic asana. And he was chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya just over and over and over. And within 6 months, he realized God. He saw God within 6 months. I mean, how long have we been practicing devotional service for, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Has Vishnu appeared to us yet? No. So we can see how determined his practice of bhakti was, how this Tivrena Bhakti Yajeta, with great force, he practiced devotional service, and he realized Vishnu in 6 months. So the point here is it is possible to realize the Lord very quickly, but he was a great personality. If you look at the line he came in, his grandfather was Swayambhuva Manu, the first Manu. His father was Uttanapad. So he came in a great line. So these Kshatriyas, especially in the previous age, very, very powerful personalities. And so for him to be able to practice devotional service like that was extraordinary, for sure. But for someone in this age to be able to practice devotional service like that would be much more extraordinary, because we, generally speaking, do not have that background or that lineage where we have that potency within the lineage. And this is why we see in the Mahabharata why Satyavati was very concerned to preserve the lineage, when Vichitravira, when he died, because she was worried that no, the lineage would not continue and there'd be no Kshatriyas to protect the planet. So then he performed the devotional service for a period of 6 months, and it was also absorbed in meditation. And then he saw the Lord within, and then the Lord disappeared. And then he opened his eyes, and the Lord was without. And then he fell down, and he was stunned. Again, he was stunned. And so we see at different times throughout this pastime how Dhruva Maharaj, because of his exchange with the Lord, is manifesting ecstatic symptoms. And this is, as Prabhupada's pointing out here, it's not something you can pretend. You can't pretend these symptoms. You can't artificially manifest these symptoms. And sometimes when you go to places like Vrindavan, Mayapur, especially Mayapur around Gaur-Punim time, you'll see they have these, the Baals, they're one of the upper sampradayas. There's 13. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has identified 13 upper sampradayas. And you'll see them, they come to Mayapur around Gaur-Punim time, and they do these kirtans. And the kirtans are quite extraordinary. And they have this capacity where the way they present the kirtan is they can inspire people to experience various emotions through the kirtan. It's just like, any artistic form. You'll see, like, if you hear a great poet or something like that, they can write poetry that really stimulates your emotions. Or singers, they can sing in such a way that really stimulates your emotions. Especially, there have been various bands, famous bands in the world, by the use of the structure of chords, they're able to stimulate emotions within people. And you'll see within Vedic music, it's very much like that. The way the music's structured, it actually stimulates spiritual emotion. And so everything within devotional service is designed to stimulate these spiritual emotions. But we see, like, when you get these people from upper sampradayas and things like that, because they're basically licentious people. They don't follow any strict sadhana. They don't follow any restrictions, control the senses, anything like that. And especially the Baals, they have these Baal, like jamborees, I guess you call them, where they come together and they engage in wife swapping and things like that. They're just wanton sense enjoyers. But what they do is when they do these kirtans in Mayapur, they actually start to manifest tears and things like that. But you'll see, like, then after they finish the kirtan, they'll go out and they speak with their friends and they'll smoke beedis and things like that. So they're not controlling their senses. So how can they be actually manifesting ecstatic symptoms. And this is the thing, it's like the process of devotional service is very, very scientific. And you can understand, there's a book by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur which is called the Madhurya Kadambini. In the Madhurya Kadambini, it describes the different stages of devotional service from Shraddha to Prem. And it also describes the symptoms one manifests at these various stages. So, there's no how do you say it? There's no scope for, pretending. There's no scope for being confused. If you think someone's very advanced, you can read, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains how to understand if a person's advanced in devotional service. Because often you'll hear the term pure devotee is loosely bandied around. So-and-so is a pure devotee. Okay, what's their symptoms? How do we establish that someone's a pure devotee? Just like we see here in the verse, it's mentioned here, this Ananda Bashpa, what is it? Kalayan, sorry, I can't read it properly. Streams of tears are constantly flowing from his eyes. And then it talks about this Viklamana Hridaya, how he's where is it? Sorry, actually I've got it here, it's easy to read to you. This Viklamana Hridaya, this melting of the heart. Sometimes when you might have a darshan of the deity and like you get like almost like, I guess an English expression would be like butterflies in your chest, this fluttering sort of feeling. And you feel drawn to emotion when you see the deity, or maybe there's a nice kirtan or something like that. And we all experience these emotions to some extent due to the influence of the process of bhakti. Yeah? And then his hairs are standing on end. Sometimes, I remember as a child, my elder brother, he liked watching spooky movies. And I was, we were living in Malaysia at the time, and we'd been watching this. It was how old? I would have been like 7 or 8 years old, and we were watching this spooky movie. And then I went out the backyard to I can't remember, maybe go to the bathroom or something, and there was a wet sheet hanging on the clothesline. This was at night time, and I walked into the wet sheet, and all the hairs on the back of my neck just stood up. I was freaked out. I thought it was like a ghost or something, So, we all have experiences like that, but oftentimes we find those experiences are motivated by some material stimulus, the udipan stimulus. Yeah? But we see here with Dhruva Maharaj and with the great souls, and we've also had that experience in our recent, all of us in devotional service, where we get these tastes of these ecstatic symptoms. But he was constantly absorbed in these ecstatic symptoms, so much so that he couldn't function externally. Yeah? And then also this forgetting his bodily existence, this natmanam ashmaram, and then finally he actually was completely separate from the gross external body, this mukta linga. Yeah? Okay, Prabhupada continues here. An important word in this verse is mukta linga. Mukta means liberated, and linga means the subtle body. When a man dies, he quits the gross body, but the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego carries him to a new body. So, and Krishna says this in the 8th chapter. He says, whatever state of being you remember or you achieve in your life, that state goes with you to the next life. And this is the subtle body, mind, intelligence, false ego. So if one has the consciousness of a dog, in the next birth you'll take on a dog's birth. Yeah? While existing in the present body, the same subtle body carries him from one stage of life to another. For example, from childhood to boyhood. And you see, this is how the consciousness continues, is the subtle body, mind, intelligence, false ego. This is what shapes the way you think and feel and everything like that, and that carries you throughout life. The mental condition of a baby is different from that of a boy. The mental condition of a boy is different from that of a young man, and the mental condition of a young man is different from that of an old man. So at death, the process of changing bodies takes place due to the subtle body. The mind, intelligence, and ego carry the soul from one gross body to another. This is called transmigration of the soul. But there is another stage when one becomes liberated from the subtle body, becomes liberated even from the subtle body. At that time, the living entity is competent and fully prepared to be transferred to the transcendental or spiritual world. And this is what we see happens with Dhruva Maharaj. Because he's achieved his Mukta Linga, then in the subsequent verses you'll see how Nanda and Sunanda, they're sent by the Vishnu from the spiritual world. They come down to take him back and say, we're inviting you to come back. And you see, it's really nice the way they present it. They're saying, we're inviting you, please come. It's not like he's forced to go. He was given an invitation. The descriptions of the bodily symptoms of Dhruva Maharaj makes it apparent that he became perfectly fit to be transferred to the spiritual world. One can experience the distinction between the subtle and gross bodies even daily. In a dream, one's gross body is lying on the bed, while the subtle body carries the soul, the living entity, to another atmosphere. But because the gross body has to be continued, the subtle body comes back and settles in the present gross body. Therefore, one has to become free from the subtle body also. This freedom is known as Mukta Linga. So Prabhupada's describing quite a lot of information in this purport. And he's describing the difference between the spiritual body, the subtle body, and the gross body. The gross body meaning earth, water, fire, air, ether, all this sort of stuff that you can contact. The subtle body means the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. And the spirit body, the self. The difference between the things. So ultimately, to return to the spiritual realm, we need to become freed from the effect of the gross and the subtle body. And this is only possible through the practice of devotional service. And as Rupa Goswami points out, that this is done, he says, it was Hiji Vedo Swayame Visparatya, that it begins with the tongue. And so we use the tongue for vibrating the holy name, and we use the tongue for tasting Krishna Prasad. So through this practice, through this process of engaging the tongue, and this is really important, because I was mentioning this verse yesterday, this Hrishikesha, Hrishikena, Sevana Bhakti Ruchite, by engaging our senses. Because the thing is, like, even though we have this spiritual body, we're not aware of it at this point. We can't perceive it. The same as, with Krishna. This is why Krishna comes as a deity, because we cannot perceive Krishna. But when he manifests as a deity, we can actually perceive him, we can experience him, we can interact with him in the deity. So in the same way, we're not able to perceive the spiritual body, but through the process of devotional service, this connection with the gross and the subtle bodies is destroyed. And the awareness of the spiritual body, it develops more and more and more until it gets to the point where, as we see here with Dhruva Maharaj, he's Mukta Linga. He's no longer experiencing or no longer aware of the gross and subtle bodies. He's completely finished with that connection. Even though he may be in a gross body, he doesn't feel, and this is defined, as I mentioned, as Jivan Mukta Suchite. Even though he's in a material body, that living entity is said to be liberated, because he no longer has that connection. Okay, I'll finish there. Any questions at all? Any comments? Yes, Prabhu. This is another symptom of the material world. It doesn't always just work. You have to do things. In the spiritual world, everything just works. Does what it's supposed to do. Yeah. Go ahead.
I have one. Actually, I have so many questions now. It doesn't work. Krishna. Yeah, maybe I have to actually, I really have a question, but it's like, maybe someone else.
I think Akila Prabhu said was saying.
You said that only by devotional service one can
this complete liberation and with these ecstatic symptoms will manifest.
Yeah.
But could you make it a little more clear why just by devotional service we can achieve this highest goal?
Because devotional service is the only way you can see Krishna. Krishna states that in two places. He says in the 11th chapter and the 18th chapter. Only by devotional service can I be seen as I am standing before you. It's very, very clear. He makes that point in the Gita twice. And because devotional service is the means to achieve Krishna. It's the only means to achieve Krishna. You can't buy Krishna. You can't bribe him. You can't force your way into the spiritual world. Only through devotional service. And through the process of devotional service, the devotee becomes so dear to Krishna that Krishna actually becomes the servant of the devotee. And this is why devotional service, the platform of pure devotional service, as it's mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti-rasa Nrsiṁha, is very rarely achieved. Because by that, getting pure devotional service, one actually controls Krishna. Because you can imagine, that when one gets to this point of pure devotional service, your only desire, your only possibility really is to serve Krishna, to do whatever he wants. But could you imagine that if a materialistic person could control God, what the outcome would be? It could be quite disastrous. It would be disastrous, because they just, everything would be focused around them controlling and enjoying. So yeah, the only means to achieve Krishna. Anything else? Yes, Prabhu.
Krishna Prabhu, I would have a question which is a little bit other topic, if it's all right.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering, there are different opinions, what's your statement on it, the worship of Lord Chaitanya, because today there was also the peacock feather on Lord Chaitanya, and I heard this is quite a big thing. So I was wondering, what the Acharyas recommend as a mood of worship of Lord Chaitanya and also Nrsiṁha, because Nrsiṁha is also a little bit special.
Yeah. So, I tell you a story. Malati was at Prabhupada was at Bhaktivedanta Manor, yeah? And he went down and he took darshan of the deities. Bhaktivedanta Manor, at the time, they had Radha Gokulananda and a deities of Gaunitai. Later, Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanuman were installed. And Prabhupada was taking darshan, and he said, who has dressed Gaunitai? And they said, Malati dressed. Bring her here. And Prabhupada spoke to her and asked her about the dressing and things. And then he said, Lord Chaitanya must always wear a peacock feather. And so he said the word must. Must is an imperative, it means you have to do it. In Mayapur, Jananivas asked Prabhupada, because he was putting a peacock feather on Lord Chaitanya and some of the Gaudiya Math were criticizing. And he asked Prabhupada, can Lord Chaitanya wear a peacock feather? And Prabhupada said, of course, why not? He's Krishna. But you can wear a peacock feather if you like. Doesn't make you God. But he's God. He always wears a peacock feather. And I was having this, there's actually, if you go on our YouTube channel, ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry, there's a discussion, or as Jananivas was explaining why Lord Chaitanya wears a peacock feather. And there's actually a book, I think it might be the Advaita Prakash, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And in that book, it describes Lord Chaitanya wearing a peacock feather. And so Jananivas often makes the point, it's not actually whether or not Lord Chaitanya wears a peacock feather, it's how many peacock feathers he wears. So he's always described as wearing a peacock feather. It's only different people, have these ideas. But because we're coming in the line from Srila Prabhupada, he's our founder acharya, therefore we follow his instructions. And others are entitled to their views on these things, but Lord Chaitanya always wears a peacock feather in his home. I know others have different opinions. My opinion is I follow Prabhupada. And Nrsiṁha, you can put peacock feather also. Although you'll see, like, if you look in the paintings of Nrsiṁha, you'll see he's always wearing a peacock feather. But if you look in our ISKCON temples, they tend not to put a peacock feather. I generally tend to encourage them to put a peacock feather on him. Because he is Vishnu Tattva. He's Krishna.
Sometimes Nrsiṁha is wearing a peacock feather at certain festivals.
Yeah. Yeah. But I wouldn't give him a flute. I think that would be a bit weird. Even like one time, the head Pujari in Los Angeles wrote Prabhupada a letter, and he was asking about giving Jagannath a flute. And Prabhupada said, "Why are you wasting my time with this question? Jagannath doesn't have a flute. Krishna has a flute." Yeah. Yes, Prabhu.
What do you mean by transcendental fear? What is a transcendental fear? Is it
transcendental fear? Just like Yasoda Mai, when she came down and saw Krishna entwined in the coils of Kaliya, she was fearful that Krishna was going to be killed by Kaliya. She was fearful that she was going to lose her beloved child. That's transcendental fear. Because it's connected to Krishna. It's not like, material fear means like, oh, I'm going to die, oh, I'm going to lose my arm, I'm going to lose my leg, or something like that. It's all about me. But her fear was about Krishna facing some difficulty or danger.
So is the fear from parents to their children also a bit transcendental?
Oh, there's some, no. Just if it's just an ordinary sort of fear about, a mother fearing about a child, no, it's not transcendental. But if for instance the mother has anxiety that the child becomes a devotee of Krishna, that's transcendental. As long as it's connected with Krishna, not mother to child, that's not transcendental. As long as it's connected to Krishna, because Krishna is transcendental, therefore anything connected to Krishna is transcendental. And this is why we try to connect ourselves with Krishna and everything we have with Krishna, because that then transcendentalizes it. Just like you see all these things here in the Pujari, in the deity room, that they have, you'll see them utilized in ordinary dealings outside the material world. You have ghee, you have lamps, you have so many different things there. Pictures, picture frames, pieces of cloth, jewelry. It just has its ordinary mundane existence, but as soon as we connect it with Krishna, as soon as we use it in Krishna's service, it becomes transcendental. So no longer are there plastic beads on his neck. These are Vaidurya money. These are transcendental jewels. That's why, like Prabhupada really understood this principle of yukta vairagya, of using everything in Krishna's service, and thus making it transcendental. Because when something, because matter and spirit cannot exist like that together. But when someone comes into contact with the transcendental nature, because the transcendental nature is so powerful, it just turns it into the spiritual nature. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Akila Prabhu.
Prabhu, you mentioned that when Yashoda Mai saw how Krishna was in the coils of Kaliya, she experienced so much fear that she died.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
What did Krishna do?
He also was then in anxiety. Oh, look what's happened, my mother's died, So he immediately subdued Kaliya and sent it away. And then he came out and he glanced over, because partially it was due to the effect of the poison, but with Mother Yasoda it was because of that pain of separation. It was so overwhelming for her, she gave up her life. So when he came out, he just glanced over all the Braj, because the shores of the lake were just littered with dead Brajbasis. Or you could say decorated with dead Brajbasis, you know, because of this fear. Because, see, we need to understand that for the Brajbasis, Krishna was everything for them. You know, even you'll see, like, for instance, in that pastime, when the Brahma Vimohan Leela, when Brahma stole the calves and the cowherd boys, and Krishna manifested himself as all the calves and all the cowherd boys, and you saw the exchange between the residents of Vrindavan and their cowherd boy children, and the cows and their calf children. The love they were showing during that period was far greater than the love they showed for their own children, because they loved Krishna even more than their own life, even more than their own children. And so what happened was when Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd men, they were up on top of Govardhan Hill, and they saw Krishna and their children and the calves down there. The cows saw their children down there, and they came running down the hill. And the cowherd men tried to stop them, and they couldn't. And then when they got down there, the cows, they were licking the calves with such affection, and they were just overwhelmed with ecstatic emotion. And the same with the cowherd men. When they got down there and they saw their children, they embraced their children, they were smelling their head. And Lord Balaram, he looked, he said, Krishna, what's going on here? What have you done? Because he could see that this was not, the emotion they experienced for their own children. This was the emotion they experienced for Krishna. Because the Brahma Vimohan Leela happened on Balaram's birthday, his appearance day, when he was at home having his birthday celebration. They do the bath and all that sort of stuff. So he could see that this was not ordinary affection. This is the type of affection one can only experience with God. Because that relationship is unique. You can't have that kind of love with an ordinary person, with a mundane, The love we feel for Krishna is unique. And so we see that when there was a potential for that love being interfered with or broken, that the Brajbasis was so overwhelmed by emotion, they gave up their lives. Especially Mother Yashoda, she gave up her life. Because this fear of losing this relationship with Krishna was too much for her. Same like when Akrura came to take the Krishna to Mathura, the gopis, they were talking to the horses, they were talking, they just became, and then Krishna was riding off on the horizon, and they just became stunned. They just couldn't move for days. They were stuck there. Because this separation from Krishna just caused such ecstatic emotion, and they just overwhelmed all external consciousness. Something we're yet to experience. But if we develop our love for Krishna, we'll experience emotions like that. But we have to develop our attraction for Krishna so much that we no longer have any attraction for the material world, just like we see here with Dhruva Maharaj. He was so attracted to Krishna, or to Vishnu, that he had no attraction for anything in this material world. But unfortunately, we have attraction for things in the material world, and that interferes with our attraction to Krishna. But if we get to the point where we're so attracted to Krishna that the material world doesn't matter to us at all, that's when we're going to experience things like this. Yeah? Yes, Prabhu?
You said one devotee left his body out of ecstasy when Krishna danced on Kaliya's head.
Yashodamai.
Yashodamai.
His mother.
Left her body?
Yeah, she gave up her life.
Then to this, and then you said he saw he has maybe gone too far, but isn't he omniscient? So couldn't he know?
Yeah, Krishna's definitely omniscient, but the thing is, like, if he was to interact with the cowherd boys, and then Vatsasura comes, or this Asura, or that Asura comes on, he says, "Oh, it's okay, I'm God, don't worry about it." How would he enjoy the exchange? Yeah?
But how does it work? Does Yogamaya makes him
Exactly.
lose?
Krishna's got all these various Shaktis. There's Yogamaya, there's the Sarup Shakti, there's the Leela Shakti, there's all these different Shaktis working to make the pastime happen. Because the thing is, like, he wants to experience being a child, being a dependent child. But if he's thinking he's God, how's he going to be a dependent child? You know, when you know, Aghasura manifests, and then all the cowherd boys, they just walk happily into the, you know, they see this like huge cave, and they think, wow, this is so amazing, this big cave, you know, and they think, it looks like a mountain cave, but smells a bit fishy. Maybe it's the mouth of a gigantic serpent. And they just, don't worry, Krishna's going to save us, and they just walk into the mouth. And then Krishna's just like standing there, and he's acting as if he's bewildered. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he describes how Krishna's marveling at how his Shaktis work.
What's marveling?
He's like, wow, this is amazing how these Shaktis are working to facilitate the pastime. Because see, the thing is, like, Krishna, he manifests as a boy, you know, as a son. He manifests as a friend. He manifests as a father. But he does it better than anyone else. He's the perfect child. He's the perfect son. He's the perfect friend. But if he was thinking he was God all the time, that would interfere with that. So by the arrangement of his Shaktis, he forgets that. You see in his exchanges with Radharani, when Radharani is rejecting Krishna, or she's angry with Krishna, Krishna falls down at her feet and he starts to weep. But if he was thinking he was God, how would he do that?
And is it the voluntarily service of the Shaktis to make him forget?
That's their business, is to do that.
So did he want them to do, or did they want to do to make him forget?
Oh, now you're asking me a question that's beyond my pay grade. I don't know. I don't know how that works. That's, yeah. The Shaktis, they're Krishna's energy. It says Parasya Shakti Vividaya Shriyate. He has many different Shaktis. And as far as I understand, he's not aware of how they're going to work. And that's why when the cowherd boys walked into the mouth of Aghasura, he was like, that's amazing. He wasn't aware that was going to happen. You know, he's not aware it's going to happen. Because if he was aware, where would be the fun for him? Because he wants to enjoy being a cowherd boy. He wants to enjoy being the son of Yasoda and Nanda. He wants to enjoy, you know, exchanges with the Sakhis, you know, with Radharani and the various gopis. He wants to enjoy these different exchanges. But if he has this perception of being God, and if you look at the way some of these pastimes take place, they're simply extraordinary. But also they're interspersed with moments of him being God. Like you look, for instance, when Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill. And then he lifted Govardhan Hill, and through the agency of his Shaktis, he manifested this extraordinary scene underneath Govardhan. It wasn't just like, you know, he lifted up the hill and there was all this rocky stuff, and like, you know, sometimes you see, I don't know if you ever see movies of that, you know, like the building gets lifted up and all the services are there, the electricity is sparking and the you know, the water's dripping out and all that. It wasn't like that at all. You know, he lifted up Govardhan Hill, and underneath there's this beautiful palace was manifested, all these, you know, marble terraces and waterfalls and trees, and it was just stunning, the whole thing. If you ever go to Perth in Australia, it's on the west coast of Perth, Jagat Tarini Mataji has made this whole kind of like not a museum, but you know, all these different displays of Krishna's different pastimes with these miniatures, like Krishna's this big and all the rest of this big, and she shows this whole scene of under Govardhan Hill and Krishna lifting Govardhan Hill for 7 days with a little pinky of his left hand. That's manifesting God. Yeah? Also, after he lifts Govardhan Hill, he puts Govardhan Hill back down, and he goes around because, you know, like Indra had been, you know, smashing lightning bolts and all sorts of stuff down on the hill. So he was going around inspecting the hill, looking for damage. But actually, what he was doing was giving Indra a chance to come and apologize, because Indra had tried to kill the Brajbasis, and Krishna wasn't happy with that. You know, Brahma, he just stole the calves and the cowherd boys. But Indra tried to kill the Brajbasis, and Krishna was not happy with that. So he gave Indra the opportunity to apologize and try to rectify his bad behavior, I guess. But the pastimes of Krishna are just inconceivable. But we can understand, and it's enough to understand that his Shaktis arrange the pastimes and he's not aware. Because if he was aware, he couldn't experience the exchange with the devotees. Because that's what it's about for him, is the exchange with the devotees. The loving exchanges he has with his devotees. So if he was aware of being God all the time, it would interfere with that. And if they were aware of him being God, just like you see, when Arjuna was aware of him being God, he stopped interacting with him like a friend, and it became very reverential. And Krishna didn't like that. And so that doesn't happen in Vrindavan. Like occasionally it happens in Krishna through Yoga Maya. She shuts that down because that interferes with his. Because Krishna wants to experience that exchange of being a child. He wants to experience that exchange of being the lover. He wants to experience that exchange of being the friend in an uninhibited way. But as soon as the Aishwarya comes in there, it inhibits it. Okay? Thank you. You remember now?
Yes. I'm a little embarrassed. It's a very simple question in one sense. That you mentioned that sometimes pujaris tend to not read so much.
Tend to what?
Tend to not read so much. And I was thinking that maybe in general the tendency is rather that we don't read so much rather than that we read too much. And I was wondering, either individually or also in collectively, is there some ways we can inspire that there is more reading amongst devotees?
Yeah, I think by talking about it, by encouraging others to do it, and by doing it ourselves. Prabhupada wanted his disciples to read his books at least 1 or 2 hours a day. But the tendency is we get caught up in the mode of passion and we think we've got much more important things to do. But if we don't read Prabhupada's books, we will not understand what we're doing. We need to understand why it is we do that, because if you read Prabhupada's books, you'll see why these various elements are important. Therefore, you give more emphasis to hearing, chanting, remembering, association with devotees. How to associate with devotees. You read Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll see how to associate with devotees. Rupa Goswami, he identifies 5 most important elements of devotional service: Sarvasanga, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavatam, Mathura Bhasa, Srrimad, Shariya Savan. So by reading the books, we understand, okay, associated with devotees, very important element of devotional service, because you'll know, through the Shastra, you'll know the importance of associating with devotees, you'll know how to associate with devotees. Nama Kirtan, most of us have that attraction for chanting. Bhagavat Shravan, this is one of the 5 most important elements of devotional service, to study the Bhagavatam. And to reside in a holy place doesn't necessarily mean we should all pack our bags and move to Vrindavan or Mayapur. It means make this a holy place. How do we make this a holy place? By always chanting the Lord's holy names. If the vibration of the Lord's holy names is coming up, this becomes a holy place. The deity is here, it's a holy place. And the last thing he says, Sri Matir Shariya Sivan, to worship the deity with faith and veneration. These things are so important. And if we don't engage in these practices, and Rupa Goswami also says that these things, the power of these 5 principles is very extraordinary and difficult to understand. Even by being a little bit connected with one of these 5 principles, even if you have no faith, it's sufficient to awaken your love of Godhead. So powerful. Bhagavat Shravan, just to study the Bhagavatam. So powerful. Because you'll understand what we're doing. You'll understand how it's important to do these things, why it's important to do these things. And this will then give us more stimulus to do these things. The more you read, the more you become enlivened in devotional service, the more you want to do devotional service. because you'll understand there's nothing in this creation like devotional service. There's nothing. It doesn't matter, you can have all the money in the world, it won't make you happy. You can have all the fast cars, you can have all the beautiful women, whatever it is you want in life. It won't make you happy because you'll just want more. But if you can understand the benefit and the power of devotional service, then you'll become happy. You become peaceful. And you'll get that through studying Prabhupada's books. Yeah. So the best way to inspire others to study Prabhupada's books is to do it yourself. Apariyachari Prabhu Jivera Sikhaya. First your behavior becomes ideal, then you can preach. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada ki, Sarveta Bhaktivinoda ki. It's always a wonderful pleasure to come here to Nrsiṁha Chalan. I think the first time I came here was about 1982, maybe. That's when Radha Madhav Mahan were here as well. It was nice. Yeah. It's wonderful. It's a very, very nice project. And it's kind of interesting because it's so peaceful here. Even though it's such a passionate country, it's such a peaceful place. And the community is very nice. I always liked the community here. Although I remember when all the brahmacharis were here, it was quite passionate too, and the Sankirtan team was here. I stayed up in the ashram a couple of times. Whew, that was intense. Wasn't it, Akila? It was pretty intense up there. But it's a wonderful community, and I just encourage you all to, work cooperatively to push on Krishna consciousness here in this community, and develop nice relationships amongst yourselves, loving relationships. This is the key. If you have good friendships in devotional service, you'll always like to be in devotional service. But if you don't get on well with each other, it's not going to be a happy place. So, understand how to have exchanges with devotees and work on cultivating your relationships with devotees. And you'll find life will become very blissful. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari.